Welcome to CISO's Insiders Podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
Good morning, everybody. Today I'm speaking with Brian Grayek from a company called Cosant Cyber Security. Brian is a virtual CISO over that company. And looking at your resume, Brian, I see that you've made your way to the corporate ladder. Started off in companies such as Motorola and Apollo Group, and moving on to various roles as a CTO. And then I think there was some kind of a transition, possibly around your time at CA, maybe after CA, where you transitioned into the security realm. And you've held a number of managerial positions, as well as senior director of information security. And right now you're at the seat of the vCISO over at Cosant. I believe this is a company based out of Tempe, Arizona. But if you could, step in and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure, love to. Yeah, I've got about 40 years of experience. Most of it is actually in information security. So I actually started at college, getting involved in InfoSec, and first job I got out of college, I was working for a telecommunications company, which was just starting into the computer realm, let's just say. And so I got pulled into security immediately there. And then after moving to Arizona, I had a position at Motorola where I was brought in as a program manager. And then within just 3 months, I got pulled into a brand new group that was being formed, a corporate group. I was the youngest member on staff, and I was the youngest engineer, and got pulled into a group that was doing all the planning work for Motorola worldwide. So I was there at Motorola for 10 years, held several top positions in InfoSec throughout several different companies. At CA, I was reporting to virtual office as a CTO, went off to a startup. I was a CTO there, and we sold the startup within a year to McAfee. And then came back to CA as the vice president running all of their security division. We had 32 products, all security products that we were selling. And until that company until CA sold off the security division, I was there. That was over 5 years. And then went into Verizon, was at Verizon running a lot of the security stuff there for about 4 years, of which kind of the pinnacle was actually getting involved in the Obamacare site, which was hacked before Verizon got a hold of it to take over the security. So I was responsible for going to Washington, D.C. and actually helping to re-secure the Obamacare site, which is a healthcare.gov. Then I've had a couple of other different IT operations and security operations positions that I got into, mainly to keep me into the Arizona area. I was tired of traveling worldwide. And then I've been with Cosant for a couple of years, doing consulting and virtual CISO work, of which I absolutely love. So 40 years of most of the time, and like I said, most of the time has been in InfoSec. So it's been a really great journey so far.
Well, that's quite a journey, and anxious to hear your thoughts about some of the questions I have, and you might be able to provide some unique perspective as someone who's been in the corporate world and also in smaller companies as well.
Yeah.
Before we get started with drilling down into the questions, I usually start off by asking a couple of icebreakers just to get to know the people, the individual I'm speaking to better. If you could share anything about your marital status and your favorite drink, that would be great.
Sure. Marital status, married 41 years. Don't know how she's been able to put up with me that long, but it's been a wild ride for 41 years. I've got one daughter, just got married actually just a month ago. And my favorite drink is actually tea. I'm a big tea drinker. If I am going out for alcohol, it's got to be a margarita or at least tequila. So not a scotch or a bourbon drinker.
Okay, that's burst in one bubble. But thank you, thank you for sharing. Let's dive right in. The purpose of this podcast is basically to provide our listeners with some views on how to get there, basically, and some experience sharing. If there's one thing you wish you'd known before you begin your career, what would that be?
Oh, easy. I wished I'd have known how fast cybersecurity was going to grow and how many people would have been needed back in the late 70s and early 80s. It was an area to where people thought it was kind of like a niche. Really wasn't a place for people if you wanted to, make good money or have a long-standing career. There wasn't that many people in it. But as of the late 90s and early 2000s, it just completely exploded until now. There's over a million jobs out there open for cybersecurity and infosec people that can't be filled. So it's a great place to be right now, especially if you have an interest.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Actually, I had an interesting conversation during the last podcast I recorded with another founder that's running also a sort of a virtual CISO company who has a somewhat unique perspective about that, about the 1 million jobs like in opening. So, but yeah, I am aware of that, and it's very hard to find qualified personnel and staff your company. So definitely, it's a great space to be in. If there's one big failure that you had, and and what you learned out of it, what would that be?
Oh, the failure, I guess, would have been thinking that I would be satisfied in doing just IT operational work. I got involved in several different companies to where I was working just in the IT space. And what I always found is that I naturally and immediately gravitated to the security side. When I was running operations at Apollo, I had all the operations, computer center network, everything else reporting to me. And we had all sorts of security issues. And what I found is that the security wasn't being addressed. And that ended up taking up more of my time than almost anything. So I think if anything, had I known it earlier, I would have continued to focus most, if not all, of my career on staying in the infosec and the cybersecurity realm, not trying to diverge and try to be, everything in IT.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I think historically speaking, well, at least for I want to say past 20 years, I think a lot of the leaders in our industry have grown either from the IT space and thinking maybe 10 years ago, maybe from the development space, I would say. But I think traditionally IT was some of the IT professionals were transitioned into what was then called information security, what we now call cybersecurity, right? And it seems like that was the way it was back then. I think right now, with the shift left tendencies and the SDLC development lifecycle, SecOps, DevOps. I think now those two, like bunch of domains, start to get meshed into one another together. But I think traditionally IT was the what do you call it, like the leaping board from which you transition into the information security.
Yeah, exactly. That leaping board is a good analogy to it. The thing is it gave me a lot of inside knowledge, experience, and capabilities, which led me to be improved in the security side. But now I see people going into and doing nothing but cybersecurity, and sometimes they lack that ability of understanding the network, understanding software and development, understanding how the servers operate and things like that. But for the time, it was perfect for me because it allowed me to be able to have a knowledge base across the industry. So the virtual CISO work that I'm doing today, it was perfect for that. But for a person that wants to just focus nothing but on cybersecurity, I would have loved to have had more more time, more education, just delving deeper into cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think today the industry is very different than what it was, right? Because today you could have a career in cybersecurity without having, prior knowledge about network architectures, operating
Yeah,
system even. I mean, you can have a career as a SOC analyst and you can move your up the ladder in that space, or you could, be in DevOps or SecOps, or you have so many options nowadays. So it's, I think the market is quite different than what it was.
yeah, it is. That's true. And today you can specialize, just like you said, in those different areas because there's so much need for that specialization where, 20 years ago, you had to know it all. There wasn't enough people to really be necessary to handle, hey, I don't need an application security guy. I don't need a network security guy. I don't need a server security guy. I need a server guy or a security guy that can cover everything. Where, like you said, today, very specialized.
Yeah. And, talking about that and what you perceive to be your failure, is there anything you would have done differently looking back?
Oh, I would have loved to have gotten a master's or even a PhD in cybersecurity. It wasn't offered. It wasn't until like the 2000s. I mean, in the, like 2000, I think 6, 7, maybe 8, to where you even saw any college offering a master's degree in security. I just wasn't there. And so I would have loved to have, gotten more education, more training in that. I went through all of the NIAC and the GSEC and those kind of trainings that, that were offered and available. But yeah, that's one of the areas where I kind of wished, I think it was a little bit ahead of the curve, but I kind of wished I would have had more opportunities to have gotten into either getting more education or even teaching more too.
Yeah. I think when I went to college, they didn't have any cybersecurity programs, and I did take like one course in encryption and obviously like a bunch of industry certifications. But yeah, I think that was relatively either new or maybe we didn't have it where I was growing up. Maybe they did have it here in the US, but okay.
Yeah, and you're a lot younger than I am too. So most of the only trainings available to me early in my career was SANS trainings.
Yeah,
that was about it. So yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm a lot younger than you, but maybe slightly. Not that young anymore, but that's a different daily struggle. In any case, can you share anything about the best resources that have helped you along the way?
Oh, absolutely. Number one, definitely mentors. I have been lucky enough to have worked for what I believe were a couple of the best mentors that I've ever known in my entire life. And I mean, I've been around a lot of really, really, high level people. I got a chance to actually take a course from Henry Kissinger, the famous, negotiator of all time. And so that was incredible. But I had 2 mentors in my career that I think just really blew away my boundaries for thinking about your job and education. Completely changed my world. The other one I think would be the conference presentations. I was lucky enough to actually go to present at a lot of conferences. So because I was there presenting, I got to actually sit in on a lot and watch, learn, listen to and learn from a lot of very, very smart people around the world. That I think was also another area to where I think it increased my knowledge, not just in the industry, but also culturally and believe it or not, spiritually. There's a lot of conferences to where they'll go into other areas that you wouldn't think maybe people would be touching upon. Career growth, there's a natural, but we're talking about things like how to be a better leader or how to mentor or how to coach people, things like that in some of these technical conferences. So those were great. I loved them.
Okay. And speaking about mentors, did you want to name drop anyone? Because that's actually my next question.
Love to. I haven't given her enough due, but I had a boss when I was at Motorola, and she was one of only, I believe, 6 female executives at Motorola at the time. and her name was Randy, and she was incredible. She ran the organization, and a couple of things that she told me really stuck with me. One was, she said, you know, you're the smartest engineer that I know, but you need to go back to school and get a degree in business, because technical, you can only go so far, but if you're on the management side and the leadership side, you know, the sky's the limit. And I did. I went back to school, got my degree in business, and it really did. It changed my entire life. Second one, name is Yogesh Gupta. He was the CTO at CA. He was actually said, I think that there was an article written about him that he was one of the 10 best CTOs of the 1980s and 90s. So incredible guy. I reported to him at the office of the virtual CISO or CTO, and he put me through all sorts of trainings to be able to speak on behalf of him and the office. And so I got involved in learning in areas that I just never even believed, you know, that I would ever be touched upon. Back in the 90s, whoever heard of cloud? Well, back then we called it, gosh, I'm trying to think of the name for it. Now we call it, you know, the cloud. But back then it was something computing, like power computing or something like that. I don't remember the name.
Wasn't it cloud computing?
No, they didn't use the word cloud. But it was the predecessor to cloud. And so I was actually involved in that. I was involved in mobile security and SDLC. You know, before that was a big term. I got my ISO and training and architectural training, you know, during that time. Just a lot of very, very in-depth and forward-looking technology training. So couldn't say enough. He was a great guy to work for. Then the last one is a local guy. His name is Mark D, I'll say, just, you know, so we don't drop too much of the name there. But I've known Mark for, oh gosh, 10, 15 years, and would love to watch this guy work as an MC or a person leading or a person presenting at a conference. He'd do a lot of MCs for conferences. He'd do a lot of presentations for conferences. Very, very smart. He was a senior level executive. But what Mark taught me was more about polishing your presence in front of an audience. You know, I thought I was a good presenter, but watching him and learning from him and taking part in some of the things that he's done, it really did. It took me from a coal to, you know, being a rough hewn diamond, you know. So he was a great guy, great mentor, great person to watch and learn from.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, it might have been called distributed computing back then, but
distributed computing, yeah. Exactly. Very good. Good memory. Distributed computing. Yeah.
I think I remember it from one of the MCSC's exam I took in 2000. But
yeah, that's what became the cloud. Yeah. And back then it was such a, you know, a turmoil because, you know, we went from the mainframe and, you know, being locked in the bubble in the glass walled room and nothing went out. And then, you know, distributed computing went, you know, with servers and you know, you broke it up to the data center. And then it came right back around. Now let's put it all out there somewhere in somebody else's data center that they manage, and we just use the, you know, the power cycles from them. So interesting how the industry seems to be like a pendulum.
Got it. Now, you know, talking about our industry, was there any one common myth that you wanted to debunk?
Well, I think the biggest one is that this is a man's industry. I have had so many really, really good females work for me, or I remember one, I did a conference and this lady comes up to me afterwards. She said she was a network person, but she said, you know, having listened to you, I'm going to get into security. And sure enough, within like 3 years, she contacted me out of the blue, said she was now the CISO for one of the largest healthcare companies in California. And she said it was because of the presentation I gave like 3 years before that got her started in that. So that was a great example. I've had some others working for me that I've mentored and coached, and they've gone on to do some great things. But I think the big thing is that I love getting out in front of like college audiences. I used to do presentations to universities and colleges all over the country. And I would love to try to entice females to understanding that they not only are an equal in InfoSec, they actually have an edge. And by the edge, what I mean is that a lot of companies out there have governmental contracts. They are required to hire minorities. So being a female with an education in InfoSec gives you that ability to be able to get the job over another guy that's just out there and maybe even has better, experience than you do, but it gets you in the door to where you can prove yourself. So because of that, I continue to profess that InfoSec is not a guy's industry. It is an equal opportunity industry, and women just have to be that much more aggressive about getting out there. There are some really, really top leaders, Mary Davidson from Oracle and such. That's just one example. Love her. But there's a lot of women out there in the InfoSec industry that have been in it for as long as I have. So that's one of the areas where I continue to kind of profess and expound upon to try to get more women into the industry. I've got 5 sisters in my family, and that's one of the things that I love to say is that, a woman can do anything a guy can do, and sometimes even better.
Usually even better, I would say, but yeah.
There you go. That's what they would say.
And I know we've spoken about the fact that you're a virtual CISO right now, and I'm not sure if all of our listeners really know what that means. Can you talk a bit about that and maybe more specifically about the market that you operate in?
Sure, love to. I do have to explain that once in a while. So a lot of companies, big companies, banks and such, they can afford to hire a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer. But at the very minimum, you're talking $200, $250, $500,000 for a good seasoned CISO. Well, a lot of smaller, medium-sized companies can't afford it. So what they started doing back in the early 2000s was they would do what's called fractional CISOs. And what it was a CISO would divide up his time between 3 or 4 different companies, and he would say, I'm a fractional CISO for company A, B, C, and D. Well, that turned into an actual industry to where in the late 2010s, 2016, 18, whatever, we started seeing virtual CISOs coming up. And what it is, basically, it's the same thing as a fractional CISO, which is that a company can't afford a full-time CISO. So I provide the CISO services, the education, the experience, the knowledge, the consulting to several companies. I split up my time across them, and I do consulting for those companies. And what they do is they basically pay a portion of my time. Each one of them pays, let's say, 10%, 20% of my time. So that allows me to have, 5, 10 customers, whatever, and spread my abilities and my knowledge across more companies. It turned out to be much, much better than working for one company because I get to work with so many different companies, and I get to be able to help out so many different companies grow that really have a desire to grow much better than, a large company to where you're making a minor difference in their operation. Here, I'm making a major impact to multiple different companies. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And can I assume that you're working with smaller companies then? Obviously not.
Absolutely. I've got 2 companies that are less than 10 people, and the rest of my clients are between 20 and 70. So I've only got, two of my clients that are over 100 people. That's it. So yeah, my focus is right around that, medium-sized company that's doing anywhere from, 10 to $50 million a year. That's the sweet spot. That's where people can afford the services. They really need it. They need that security because of their industry that they're in, or because of protection of their IT assets, intellectual property, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And can I assume it's like across the board, like fintech and health and whatever?
Yes, I'm an expert in HIPAA. I do SOC, I do ISO, I do CMMC, which is the governmental. So we have a lot of DoD type of companies that sell directly to the government. I have a SaaS company, software company that I work with. So I carry the gamut, everything from finance to healthcare to governmental to manufacturing to services.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And working with these like all types of customers, what are the common challenges that you see? Again, without divulging any sensitive
Oh, yeah.
information,
No,
generally
never do that.
speaking. Yeah, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, I think the challenges are the same. How do I secure my environment the most efficient way possible, spending the least amount of money that I can? How do I become compliant, but how do I become more secure? And usually people think that I become more secure by being compliant. It's not. You can be compliant. It's a checkbox. I can be compliant with different standards and check them off, no problem. But I might not be secure. I've written a couple of articles out there that you can actually, people can find. One of them is about how some of these security standards that are out there aren't addressing the real problems. And so we've been doing a lot of what's called a basic risk assessment, to where we find that a company has a risk in an area that a security compliance isn't even touching. We've seen examples of that happen recently here with the pipeline that got hacked into. That came through because they had their email platform was 5 years out of date. We see those kind of things happening all the time, and that isn't something that you can check off in a compliance. It says you should have things up to date and patched and whatever, but there's nothing forcing people to do that. So that's one of the areas where I think that it's a common challenge across the industry. It doesn't matter where you're at.
Yeah, I've actually written an article about 2 years ago called "Compliance is BS." So we're on LinkedIn.
That's great.
Yeah, basically, I mean, talking about from a different angle about what you were mentioning right now, and you might know that part of the businesses that I own, deal with compliance, so I don't really feel it's
Yes.
BS, but I do understand the challenge between what compliance means, what it should mean, and what really happens. Anything, there's a difference between demonstrating to an auditor and actually practicing what it is that you need to be doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why can't we get that through to lawmakers? They seem to understand that, or they think they understand that the only way to drive security is by forcing somebody to be compliant. PCI, I think, is the only real example that really worked. And the only reason that worked was because it was an industry standard created by the credit card industry that said, if you're not going to do this, we're going to just cut you off. You can't take credit cards. So that really had some teeth in it. But these new compliance standards, they don't have teeth. They don't really attack the heart of insecurity. So I love what you said. Compliance is BS, because in actuality, I would much rather have a company look at how to be secure rather than how to be compliant. But unfortunately, it's a necessary evil at this point in time.
Yeah, and then about PCI, so this is actually how I started my first business, becoming a QSA for PCI, Qualified Security Assessor. And the fact of the matter is that before they had PCI in place, the amount of fraudulent activities was so much higher than it is right now. So, and you are right, it does have teeth. But I would argue that even ISO 27001 or SOC 2 have teeth, just a different kind, because this is mandated by your customers most likely. And then you can just, if you don't demonstrate some types of compliance, you might not get a deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's not
absolutely.
it's not as harsh as we're cut off as the payment industry has done, but it is somewhat enforceable. I would argue.
Yeah, I was a QSA also years and years ago. And so that was an interesting point of I only did it for probably 1 or 2 years, because it wasn't satisfying. I'd go in and work with a company to help them audit to be PCI compliant, but it really wasn't getting anything out of it. I felt like I had more value in helping a company to be secure rather than auditing them. So that was just a short-lived kind of area of my career that I'm glad I kind of got out of real quickly. But like you said, it does, the ISO does have some teeth, maybe some little, molars, and maybe a couple of incisors, but ISO, the only thing generating it is a customer's requirements. Hey, I want you to be ISO, 27001 certified or whatever. But I have seen a lot of ISO certified companies that aren't secure, and their operations are very refined, but they may not be the same level as what another company is that has no ISO certification. So I guess it all depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, no argument there. Talking a bit about vendor relationship management. So you're an external vendor yourself, and I'm assuming
Yes.
you have a relationship with other vendors as part of your role as a virtual CISO. Is there anything you can, provide us in terms of advice and on how to play well together with additional vendors in the mix?
Absolutely. We've got a VP of Business Development at Cosant, Mark Kirstein, and Mark is incredible. He has a really good methodology for working with partners, and we call them partners, and he refers to them as in our ecosystem. And it's really kind of an interesting relationship because it is a really symbiotic one. We have a lot of MSSPs that we deal with. We give them business, and because we have customers that are looking for somebody to handle their IT and their security. So they're looking for somebody to take over, which would be an MSP or an MSSP. So then on the MSP or MSSP side, they have companies that work with them that say, hey, I need somebody to help me be compliant, or I need somebody to help me, be more secure, and they refer people to us. It's really quite interesting the way that this business that we've gotten into has a very mutual, beneficial kind of a relationship with it. So much so to where I was actually invited to the Acronis World, which was in Miami, Florida last year. And I actually did a conference, a speaking engagement for them, speaking about security in MSSPs. So that's a relationship we're trying to cultivate, and it's worked out very valuable for everybody involved. We also have relationships with privacy officers, DPOs, data privacy officers. We have relationships with auditors, and those relationships, again, are very symbiotic. We're giving customers to them, they're finding customers that need consulting or help. In several of the regulations, there's a really big dividing line between consulting and auditing. You can't do both. So we find that those people on the right side, the auditors, will then look for people that can help their customers on the left side, consulting, and that's where they send people to us.
Yeah, more specifically, like, ISO 27001 is one example. As an external auditor, you can't do anything as
Yes.
in ways of consulting.
Right, SOC has the same thing, SOC 2.
SOC 2.
CMMC, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of them. They want that division between helping and auditing. That way you can't, you're not the wolf in the chickens, roost.
When you start working with a new customer, what's typically your biggest challenge?
Wow, trust. Typically I'll find a lot of customers will look up my background in LinkedIn, which is good because they see, the kind of things I've done. I've got 40 years of experience. They see that I've worked with big companies and small companies, everything from a startup to a Fortune 29 I've worked for. They see that I've got experience both in operations as in software development and in security. So I like that when they look it up and they find out what I've got, but there's still that area to where you've got to build that trust. And the way that I do that is with honest communication. It seems like it's the fastest and best way to do, which is share some things with my customers personally, get to know them, let them get to know me a little bit, and then have honest discussions about where they are in the journey. And we call this a journey because there is no goal, there is no ending. It's not like we're taking a trip to, New York City. You don't get to security and then you say, okay, I'm done. I'll just sit back and rest. Every day there's something new that happens. Every day there's another zero-day alert. Every day the Russians or the Chinese are finding a new way to hack into us. So security is a journey. And what we like to do is we like to be at that position to where we can help our customers to be more efficient on that journey.
Okay, thank you for that. And same question when starting to work with a new vendor. What's the biggest challenge there?
Oh, wow. Getting to know their environment. Everybody's environment is so different. I've got one customer now that is completely 100% virtual. Now, if somebody would have told me that 10 years ago, I'd have told them they were crazy. There's no way you could run a company being 100% virtual. How would you do it? How could you trust your employees? How would you know what they're doing? How could you keep them secure? You know, they have completely broken the paradigm. And what is so funny is, as we're going into some of these security regulations, even the auditors don't know how to handle it. You know,
Yeah,
the
in some
auditors will
cases.
say, okay, where's your data stored? In the cloud. No. Where is your data stored? In the cloud. No. Physically, what state is your data stored? In the cloud. You know, it's like, how am I going to tell you, auditor? It's there. You know, I can't tell you what physical geographical location it's at. Now, with some places like Amazon, I can specify it's in the East Coast or the West Coast. But very few companies I can say, well, it's sitting in Seattle, Washington. You know, just isn't going to happen. So even auditors are having a challenge trying to audit a virtual company.
And what would you say is the biggest difference basically between a virtual CISO and a full-time CISO, with the exception of obviously the compensation package?
Yeah. I think the compensation is probably the key one. I could make a lot more money working for a big, Fortune 100 company, being a CISO, but you have to be on call 24/7 by 365. A lot of the positions I've had in the past, I traveled worldwide. You burn the candle at both ends. I think that the really big difference between my role and a full-time CISO, not a virtual, I should say, not full-time, not that I'm not full-time, I'm full-time, just virtual. I think the only thing that's different is the commitment to the work. And that is that a full-time CISO has to divide up their time between the business, the finance, the budget, and security. As a virtual CISO, I can focus with my customer just on InfoSec or cybersecurity. I can completely do nothing but help. They're going to worry about the budget. They're going to worry about how I get paid. They're going to worry about the contracts. They're going to worry about, getting funding for the next round of, for their startup. I only have to worry about how to make them better on cybersecurity. So that's one of the reasons I love this. I love this work.
Thank you. Great feedback. In your opinion, if I were to talk to one of your customers, what would the feedback I would get be? What would they say about you?
Well, I think probably a lot of them would say I'm a quiet, shy kind of a guy. That's a joke. No, as you can tell, I am very, I speak a lot. I do a lot of conferences. So speaking verbally and having a conversation is very, very easy to me. I'm not an extrovert, but people think that I am. I think that if you ask my customers, I think what they would probably tell you is I'm extremely hardworking. I'm very knowledgeable about security. I know so much about so many different areas. And I think the other thing is I've had customers call me at all hours, day and night and whatever, and I will pick up the phone and I will help them no matter what. I think that, and I hope that all of my customers would say the number one thing that they like about me is that I care about them. I care about my customers. What I'm doing isn't for a paycheck. What I'm doing is for making my clients more secure so that they can protect their intellectual property so that they can continue to grow. That's my primary goal.
Okay, thank you. And who would you say is your ideal customer? What type of qualities do they have, personalities and so on?
I've got all sorts of different personalities in the people that are my single point of contacts for different companies. I've got quiet, reserved, shy. I've got one of my customers has a degree in microbiology, but yet he's a CTO for a tech company. Very, very interesting guy. Love talking with him. I don't think that there's a personality. I don't think that there's a industry. What I think is the ideal customer is somebody that really cares about improving their security and securing their intellectual property. That, I think, is the ideal customer. I have worked with, now I don't have any currently today, but I have worked with companies in the past that said, just make us checkbox compliant. We just want to be able to check off the boxes to say we're compliant. We don't care about being really secure. We just want to be compliant. That's the worst thing, because if all you're trying to do is be compliant, like you said earlier on in the conversation, it doesn't mean you're secure. And those are the companies that I've watched get hacked into, lose everything, and they're out of business in 30 days. We've seen again and again in the news, in the industry, companies get hacked into because nobody is focusing on cybersecurity. There's not a big enough budget. The CISO always gets blamed because it's their fault, even though the budget was only 10% of what they got 5 years ago. So like I said, I think that the ideal customer is just somebody that cares about being, getting improvements in the security.
Got it. Thank you. And I think that answers my next question about qualities that you don't like in a customer.
Yeah, I think we nailed that one.
Yeah.
Just get me certified. I don't care how, just give me, no, we can't do that. We got to do it the right way, because auditors, if they're good, they will find the gaps. And I've worked with a lot of really good ones.
Any specific, we're coming to an end, for this episode, anywhere specific our listeners can connect with you online? Would it be like any social media platform or anything else, anywhere else?
Yeah, the only social media platform that I use is LinkedIn, as far as on a business side. Just get me at, Brian.Grayek, BRIAN.GRAYEK at LinkedIn.com or LinkedIn, and connect up with me there. I do a lot of conversation with people via email. Willing to answer any kind of questions. Like I said, I do like to write stories. I like to write articles in newspapers, magazines. InfoSec Professional just got published one of my articles in the January-February issue, in fact. So anybody reads the stuff I've got out there and you want to comment on it, provide your own point of view, argue with me about my points, hey, I love it. But like I said, LinkedIn is the best way to contact with me.
Yeah, makes sense. For final question, let's assume money was never an issue. What would you do with your life?
I've always wondered, if I won the lottery, what would I do? You ever wonder about those?
You're probably the only one.
Yeah. I've always thought about it. I'd love to go back to school. I always thought, hey, I'd love to go back to school and just learn the things that I want to learn without having to care about anything else, But now that I've gotten to that point in my life, I think what I'd really love to do is just travel and do presentations, conferences all over. I've been offered that before, but I never took it up because, I had a daughter and wanted to spend, time and helping her to grow. But I think now, that I'm, getting older in my age, traveling around, doing presentations, how to be more secure easily. That's something that, I would actually think about doing if I didn't have to worry about money.
Okay, fair enough. Great. So I think with that, we could leave this episode on a high note. Thank you so much for, taking the time and clearing your calendar for me today. I know you're probably busy. And I enjoyed the conversation, hoping it was mutual. And I did take a few notes here, so got some great insights from you, and hoping those would resonate with our listeners.
Yeah, I love hearing feedback from people. I'm looking forward to it because I think there was some great questions, good interaction, and I'm just really looking forward to hearing this and how it goes in the final production, and looking to see what kind of feedback we get. It's been fun.
Yeah, soon. It's going to happen soon. Thank you so much, Brian. Have a good one.
Thank you. Okay, you too. Take care.
Bye-bye.